Hey everyone, so today I have the Demko knives AD-20.5 or the AD-20.5. So today I'm going to do the video a little bit differently. So I'm going to just try to do it a kind of step-by-step process, since this knife will be kind of a test run, since I'll be doing scales out of I just have some scrap G10, purple G10 right here, nothing fancy, 1/8 inch thick test run where the G10 goes on top of the liners here. As you guys can see, there's going to be a little bit of a gap, but I want to see how it looks and if the customer is okay with it. So I'm going to take it apart and then we'll see what the scales look like. Alright, so here I have it taken apart and lay the G10 on top of the liner itself. So just kind of sandwich it right there on top like that. So that's where we're going to go with, just to see what it looks like. The only issue is going to be where the backspacer is. As you guys can see, it's cut out right down there. So when you look down on it, there's going to be a gap. But once I have both of the rough shaped scales for the test, I will show you exactly what I'm talking about, and hopefully it looks good. Alright, so when I start on creating scales, I like to start with the pivot hole. And then I'll take the original scale, as you guys can see here, and then I will put the pivot pin through. See if I can get that on camera. Right there. And then I will place the pivot pin through the hole I just created. And then that way you can kind of see how you can line up, or use the original as a guide to line up the holes. And then you just drill through. So I'm going to start with the hardware holes back here. And I'm going to go just slightly smaller than the hardware screws, that way I can screw it into the G10 itself. And then after that, once these are all lined up and locked in, then I will do the stop pins. Okay, so I drilled the first hole, or the first hardware hole here in the back. And now I'm going to go on to the next two, and then we'll go on to the stop pins. But that's just an idea of how I do it. Or, again, I'm just kind of doing a step-by-step here. So a pivot pin, one of the hardware holes, I usually go the furthest one down, and then I will do the next two, or however many there are. And once that's locked in with the other screws, then we'll go to the stop pins. Okay, now that the hardware screws are all screwed in and the pivot pin is still in, although it is loose, but it is basically locked in onto the new material that we're going to be using to create the scales. So now I can do the lock pins up here, or not the lock pins, but the stop pins. And basically once I have those drilled out, we'll go from there. Alright, now that I got the stop pin holes drilled out, you guys can see here, what I do is I take off the original scale, and then I'll take the stop pins, and I will just double check to make sure they fit in there. And these ones are smaller, which I have right here. Stick them through, and they do fit through. Sometimes they're a tight fit, but you can always wiggle the drill bit just a little bit. Obviously not too much to where it ruins the size, but you make just enough clearance for the stop pins to fit through. So now what I'm going to do is the same process on the other scales, and then we'll go from there. Alright, now that I got the holes on the other scale, so you guys can see here, all the holes are finished. Now I'm going to do, for the hardware, I'm going to make them big enough for the hardware screws to go all the way through easily, since they are a tight fit right now. And then I'm going to countersink the pivot hole and then the hardware screws. So I'm going to do that and be right back. Alright, so everything is countersunk. As you guys can see, I got all the hardware holes countersunk, and then the pivot pins countersunk. And basically, while I was countersinking all the holes for the hardware, I would always double check just to make sure it fits. As you guys can see, it goes in nicely. Same with the other one. And then also I double checked to see for the hardware as well. And again, it just needs to pop out just enough, as you guys can see. That way it'll bite into the standoffs, or the threaded tubes. And then I see it, I will get that. But all done, so now I'm going to trace it and then cut out the basic shape. Alright, so now that I rough shaped the scales with the table grinder, as you guys can see here, it's not perfect, but it's pretty close to the liners. Get the basic shape there. And then also, this is the time to check the fit up to make sure everything is sitting nicely and is straight, so that way everything functions. And so far we are good to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and mark inside here the outline of the liners, and then I'm going to final shape it with the Dremel. Alright, so I finished doing the final shaping of the scales, and I got a little carried away, I'll be honest, but I put some texture on there, you guys can see, just to you know, make it cool, I guess, even though this is just a test run. But I've always wanted to try this style of scalloping or texturing with the Dremel, so that's what we ended up with. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to put some tung oil on it just to enhance the purple, and then we'll go back up in the studio and we'll put it together and we'll see what it looks like. Alright, so we're back up here in the studio, and I did add the tung oil to darken the scales, but here they are. Super happy with them. Again, these are just test runs, so it's nothing too fancy. And since I figured there was a test run just for the scales, I figured I'd go a little bit different on the texture as well. But it does a very similar thing in the light that carbon fiber does, so that's why I like to add texture to G10 as well. But let me know down below what you guys think of just the scales or the texture on the scales. I think it looks pretty cool. I'll definitely have to do a knife like this. I'm not sure which one yet, but I really do like that texture. So anyways, let's put this thing together and see what it looks like between the little gaps that I was talking about. Alright, so here it is all put together, and I am happy with it. Let me know what you guys think down below. But here were the gaps that I was going to mention, or that I was talking about earlier. So you do have these gaps back here. So you can see just those two little gaps. So that's the issue I have with doing a custom job for especially for knives that have recessed liners. So this is a perfect example of why I don't do them just yet, since I will get a CNC eventually. This is something I could personally live with on my own personal knife. But again, I'm going to have to get the green light from the customer to see if he's okay with this gap over here in the back by the back spacer. And then over here in the front, right here, it doesn't meet up like it does with the liner, obviously. But that's another issue I'll have to get the green light from the customer. But let me know down below what you guys think. If this is something you'd be okay with. Because I know for me personally, I'd be okay with it. But again, this is a customer's knife, and I want it to be very, very well done. The action is still good on this. I mean, this knife in general is just amazing. If you guys can get your hands on one, I highly recommend it. Extremely smooth and reliable. I think it looks pretty good with purple and gray. Again, these are just test runs, so I'm going to discuss it further with the customer and we'll see what he says. If you guys want me to do more step-by-step videos, let me know. That way I can just customize the knives and do the same process, kind of like I did in this video. So yeah, feel free to let me know down below if that's kind of more your guys' style, and I'll definitely do the videos that way. So with the test scales finished, that is pretty much what I was looking for and I was expecting. So we'll see what happens down the road. But thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys on the next one.